We're moving in a new direction, William. One that requires a more agile, forward-thinking approach to internal controls. The words hung in the refrigerated air of the 34th floor conference room, as sterile and lifeless as the gray walls. Bryce Thorne, the new senior vice president of operations, leaned back in his Herman Miller Aeron chair. He was 32 years old, with a fresh MBA from Wharton and a jawline that belonged on a recruiting poster. He was also the CFO's son-in-law. He delivered the line with the practiced sincerity of someone who had rehearsed it in front of a mirror, probably with a PowerPoint slide titled Synergistic Restructuring glowing behind him. I just stared at him. I didn't blink. My hands rested flat on the polished mahogany table, my knuckles showing white against the dark wood. I had seen this table installed back in 2008. I had approved the invoice for it. My name is William Garrett. I'm 49 years old. And for the past 18 years, I had served as the director of internal audit for Omnicorp Logistics, a Fortune 500 company I had helped grow from a regional player into a global giant. Bryce continued, a small, condescending smile playing on his lips. Your contributions have been noted, but the board feels, and I concur, that we need a different skill set for the next phase of our growth. Digital transformation requires a new paradigm. Paradigm. The word landed with a dull thud. It was a word people used when they had no idea what they were actually talking about. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately, he said, his tone shifting from faux sympathetic to briskly efficient. HR has your exit package. Security will escort you from the building. He slid a crisp white envelope across the table. It stopped a few inches from my hands. I didn't touch it. I knew what this was about. It wasn't about paradigms or agility. It was about Project Chimera. It was about the $8.7 million I had discovered 6 months ago, siphoned off through a web of shell corporations and fraudulent invoices, all leading directly to Bryce's father-in-law, Robert Thorne, the company's chief financial officer. They thought this was the end. They thought they were cutting out the cancer. They believed that by removing me, they were burying the evidence, wiping the slate clean before anyone else could find it. They were wrong. If you appreciate stories where corporate arrogance collides with cold, hard facts, and where quiet competence triumphs over loud corruption, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. I upload stories like this regularly, and by subscribing and hitting that notification bell, you won't miss the moment justice is served. The security guard, a man named Hector I'd shared coffee with for over a decade, couldn't meet my eyes. He held a cardboard box for my personal effects. My office was already being sanitized. Bryce had probably ordered my network access revoked before he'd even finished his little speech. He was thorough in his own clumsy way. I placed my 1953 Rolex Submariner, a gift from my father, into the box, along with a framed photo of my daughter, Chloe, at her high school graduation. I left the Excellence in Auditing Award from 2014 on the shelf. It felt tainted now. As Hector walked me to the elevator, the silence was heavy. Employees in their cubicles stared at their screens, pretending not to watch the public execution. They knew. In a corporation, the jungle drums beat fast. The director of internal audit doesn't get walked out by security unless something is very wrong. They just assumed the wrongness was with me. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, Hector beside me. He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of pity and discomfort. "Sorry, Will," he mumbled. I just nodded. It wasn't his fault. Bryce Thorne and his father-in-law believed the evidence of their crimes lived on a server in the Omnicorp data center. They believed that with my credentials deleted and my hard drive wiped, the digital ghosts would vanish. What they failed to understand was my professional philosophy, a lesson beaten into me long before they ever heard the term digital transformation. The breaking point came 6 months ago, on a Tuesday in April. I was conducting a routine Q1 audit, a process I had refined over 18 years into a brutally efficient machine. My department wasn't just about ticking boxes for Sarbanes-Oxley. We were the immune system of the company. We hunted for inefficiency, waste, and fraud with a quiet, relentless focus. I was reviewing disbursements to new vendors, a standard protocol. That's when I saw it. A payment for $78,500 to a company called Apex Solutions LLC for strategic consulting services. The invoice was vague. The address for Apex was a P.O. box in Wilmington, Delaware, a classic red flag. My junior analyst, a sharp kid named David, had already flagged it as unusual, but accepted the explanation when the payment was approved directly by the CFO's office. Standard procedure dictated that any new vendor payment over $50,000 required dual sign-off from the department head who commissioned the work. This one had only one signature: Robert Thorne. I told David to move on to the next batch. I took this one myself. For me, auditing is like pulling a single thread from a complex tapestry. If it comes out clean, the fabric is sound. If it snags, you keep pulling. This one snagged immediately. I ran a check on Apex Solutions. The LLC was formed 13 months prior. The registered agent was a generic service used to create anonymous shell companies. There was no website, no phone number, no public presence. It was a ghost. I cross-referenced the payment with project codes. The $78,500 was billed to something called Project Chimera. I'd never heard of it. It wasn't on any official project roster. I dug into the server. Archives, using my director-level access. I found the project's authorization file. It was created by Thorne himself and classified as Executive Level Strategic Initiative. The budget was opaque, a single line item for $2.5 million in discretionary consulting fees. The thread was now a rope. I kept pulling. Over the next 3 weeks, working late into the night after my team had gone home, I unraveled Project Chimera. It was a masterclass in white-collar crime. A network of 3 shell companies, Apex Solutions, Trident Global, and Meridian Strategies, were billing Omnicorp for non-existent services. The invoices were all for similar round number amounts, always just under a major internal threshold, and always approved by the same 3 executives: Robert Thorne, the CFO, Marcus Cole, the VP of Global Logistics, and Sarah Jenkins, the VP of Procurement. The money flowed from Omnicorp to the shells. From there, it was wired to a secondary set of accounts in the Cayman Islands. Then, a portion of it, around 60%, was wired back to personal accounts belonging to Thorne, Cole, and Jenkins in the United States, disguised as investment returns from an offshore fund. It was clean, it was sophisticated, and it was bleeding the company dry. By the time I had the full picture, the total was $8.7 million. This is where my path diverged from what the textbooks teach. The textbook says you take your findings to the audit committee of the board of directors. You present the evidence. You let the system work. But I had been at Omnicorp for 18 years. I knew the board. I knew who played golf with whom. The chairman of the audit committee, George Riley, was Thorne's old college roommate. Reporting it internally would have been suicide. They would have buried me, discredited my findings, and hired an independent firm to conduct a review that would find nothing but minor accounting irregularities. I knew I was holding a live grenade. My first thought wasn't about justice. It was about survival. Back in 1996, I was a junior auditor at a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Ohio. My boss, Arthur Vance, was a man who seemed to be carved from granite and cigar smoke. He was old school. He used a fountain pen and wore suspenders. He trusted no one. One afternoon, he found me staring at a screen, frustrated. I'd found evidence of inventory manipulation, but the data was stored on a central server, and the IT director was stonewalling me. Arthur put a heavy hand on my shoulder. His voice was a low rumble. "Will, Let me tell you the 2 rules of this job. Rule 1. The numbers never lie, but people do. Rule 2. Never, ever trust a system you don't control. He took me into his office. It was lined with filing cabinets. He pulled open a drawer. It was filled with floppy disks, and later CDs and external hard drives. Every audit I've ever run, he said, I keep my own copy. A complete independent record of the evidence. Off the network. In my custody. The company owns your work product, but you own your integrity. And your integrity is only as good as the proof you can hold in your own hand. That lesson became my professional religion. For 18 years at Omnicorp, I had maintained my own archive. Every significant audit, every sensitive finding, every piece of critical evidence was duplicated onto an encrypted solid-state drive. I used a military-grade AES-256 encryption protocol. I had 3 identical drives. One was in a fireproof safe in my home office. One was in a safe deposit box at a U.S. bank branch 2 towns over. The third I carried in my briefcase. So when I uncovered the $8.7 million fraud, I didn't file a report. I started compiling a case. For 6 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was William Garrett, the meticulous, slightly boring director of internal audit. By night, I was a forensic investigator building an airtight prosecution. I downloaded every fraudulent invoice, every falsified approval, every wire transfer confirmation. I captured server logs showing who accessed the files and when. I used a network sniffer on a firewalled laptop to capture raw data packets related to the transfers, proving their origin and destination beyond any doubt. I cross-referenced corporate expense reports, finding lavish dinners and trips for Thorne, Cole, and Jenkins that coincided with the dates of major fund transfers. They were celebrating their theft with company money. The irony was noted. I organized the data into a fortress of proof. I created a master document, a 248-page report I internally titled the Chimera Compendium. It was indexed, cross-referenced, and annotated. It had a table of contents, an executive summary, and detailed profiles of each perpetrator, each shell company, and each transaction. I created flowcharts that even a jury of laymen could understand, tracing the money from Omnicorp's accounts to their pockets. 3 months into this process, I made a call. I found the top whistleblower attorney in the country, a man named Julian Croft in Washington, D.C. His firm specialized in representing clients in False Claims Act and SEC fraud cases. We spoke for an hour on a burner phone. I didn't give him my name or the company's. I just laid out the facts of the fraud. His interest was immediate. If what you're saying is true, and you have the documentation to back it up, he said, his voice sharp and precise, you don't go to the board. You don't go to the CEO. They will crush you. You come to me. We package it, and we take it directly to the SEC and the Department of Justice. You will be protected, and you will be rewarded. The SEC's whistleblower program entitles individuals who provide original information about securities fraud to between 10% and 30% of the monetary sanctions collected by the government. The key was providing the information before an investigation was public and ensuring it was the catalyst for the government's action. Julian and I established a secure communication channel. I sent him a copy of the compendium on one of my encrypted drives via a bonded courier. He vetted the information. His response came a week later. Mr. Garrett, he said, using my name for the first time, you have not just found a smoking gun. You have built the entire ballistics lab around it. Now, we wait. They have to make a move. When they try to bury you, they will trigger the trap themselves. The first move came 2 months later. Sarah Jenkins, the VP of Procurement, announced her early retirement. She was 52. She was cashing out. Then, Marcus Cole was relocated to run the company's new Singapore office, a promotion that was effectively an exile with a golden parachute. That left Thorne. He was too powerful to just retire. He needed to clean up the last loose end. Me. He couldn't fire me himself. It would look too suspicious for a CFO to fire his own auditor. So he used his son-in-law. Bryce's promotion to SVP of Operations, a role that gave him oversight of my department, was announced 3 weeks ago. I knew my time was short. The countdown had begun. Which brings me back to the elevator, descending 34 floors with my life in a cardboard box. As I stepped out into the gleaming marble lobby of the Omnicorp Tower, my phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert from HR. Exit interview survey. They wanted me to rate my termination experience on a scale of 1 to 5. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. I walked out onto the bustling street. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust and hot pavement. I didn't go to my car. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to a small, independent coffee shop called The Daily Grind. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a small table in the back. At 4:17 p.m., according to the timestamp on my phone, I pulled out the burner I'd bought for this purpose. I dialed Julian Croft. He answered on the first ring. Julian Croft. "They did it," I said. My voice was steady, measured. "I'm out." There was a brief pause on the line, the sound of a pen tapping on a desk. "Excellent," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a surgeon about to make the first incision. "The predicate is now established. Wrongful termination of a potential whistleblower to conceal fraud. That adds obstruction of justice to the list. I am filing the official submission with the SEC right now. It will be time-stamped as of 4:19 p.m. I am also calling my contact at the DOJ's criminal division. You are to proceed as planned. Do you have the package?" "I have it," I said, patting my briefcase. "Good. They will expect you to go home, get drunk, and call a lawyer in the morning. They will not expect this." We disconnected. I finished my coffee, the bitter liquid grounding me. I left the cup on the table and walked out. I got into my meticulously maintained 2012 Honda Accord, paid off for years, 142,000 miles, runs like a top, and drove not toward my suburban home, but toward the heart of downtown. The J. Edgar Hoover building was an imposing block of concrete and glass. I parked in a public garage a block away. Carrying my briefcase, I walked to the main entrance. The security was what you'd expect. I put my briefcase on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector. Inside, I approached the main reception desk. A stern-faced agent looked up at me. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "My name is William Garrett. I have an appointment with the Economic Crimes Unit. They are expecting me." Julian had made the call. An agent came down to meet me. He was young, wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right. He led me through a series of keycard-protected doors to a small, windowless interview room. Another agent was already there, older, with weary eyes that had seen everything. He introduced himself as Special Agent Miller. "Mr. Garrett," Miller said, gesturing to a chair, "your counsel, Mr. Croft, informed us you have information regarding potential securities fraud at Omnicorp Logistics." "I do," I said. I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it. I took out the encrypted SSD and a thick, spiral-bound document. "This is a hard copy of my preliminary findings," I said, pushing the binder across the table. "I call it the Chimera Compendium. This," I added, holding up the drive, "is everything. Every piece of source data, every transaction log, every email. It's all organized and indexed to correspond with the report." Miller picked up the binder. He flipped through it. His eyebrows rose slightly as he saw the flowcharts, the detailed transaction lists, the names. He looked at his younger partner. It was a look that said, "This isn't a crackpot. This is Christmas." "Would you be willing to walk us through it?" he asked. "I'd be happy to," I said. For the next 4 hours, I gave them a masterclass on the $8.7 million fraud. I was in my element. This was my work. I explained the shell companies, the approval overrides, the money laundering techniques. I didn't just give them a destination. I gave them a roadmap. I showed them exactly where to look, what to seize, and who to question. Meanwhile, back at Omnicorp, Bryce and Thorne were likely celebrating. They would have sent out a memo about my departure, filled with corporate jargon about new leadership and strategic alignment. They would have ordered IT to perform a deep-level wipe of my workstation and server directories. They were salting the earth, thinking they were destroying the last vestiges of my work. They had no idea that the storm was already on top of them. The payback came 2 days later, but not in the way I'd expected. It wasn't a quiet investigation. It was a lightning raid. At 9:15 a.m. on a Thursday, a team of 24 FBI agents, armed with a federal search warrant, walked into the Omnicorp headquarters. They went straight to the 34th floor. They sealed the executive wing. They seized Robert Thorne's computers, his files, his phone. They did the same to the empty offices of Marcus Cole and Sarah Jenkins, and they paid a special visit to Bryce Thorne, interrupting a meeting where he was, according to a source who called me later, presenting a new, synergy-focused workflow optimization plan. The warrant was specific. It named Project Chimera. It named Apex Solutions, Trident Global, and Meridian Strategies. It referenced specific transaction dates and account numbers. It was a surgical strike, guided by the intel I had provided. Thorne, according to witnesses, turned a shade of gray that matched the conference room walls. He started blustering about corporate counsel and unlawful intrusion. Special Agent Miller, the same man I had briefed, simply handed him a copy of the warrant and said, "Mr. Thorne, you can call your lawyer from our office." They were all taken in for questioning. The company's stock was halted, pending a material news announcement. The SEC simultaneously announced a formal investigation into Omnicorp's accounting practices and froze all of Thorne's personal assets, along with those of Cole and Jenkins. The aftermath was a slow, controlled demolition. Robert Thorne, the architect of the scheme, discovered that his reputation and connections meant nothing against a mountain of irrefutable data. My compendium became the prosecution's Exhibit A. Faced with a 200-page confession he didn't write, his legal defense crumbled. He was indicted on 12 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. He was fired by the board in a panicked emergency session. His wife, Bryce's mother-in-law, filed for divorce a month later to protect what little she had left. Thorne was convicted on all counts. The judge, citing the brazen and systematic nature of the betrayal of trust, sentenced him to 12 years in a federal medium security prison. He lost his house, his art collection, and his pension. Bryce Thorne, the arrogant son-in-law, learned a hard lesson about paradigms. He was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. His restructuring of my department was seen by the prosecution for exactly what it was: a clumsy attempt to destroy evidence. He tried to cooperate, throwing his father-in-law under the bus, but it was too little, too late. He pleaded guilty and received a sentence of 18 months. His Wharton MBA now decorates the wall of a cell. His wife, Thorne's daughter, left him before the sentencing. He was a pariah. Last I heard after his release, he was working as a shift manager at a big box retail store, optimizing workflows in the home goods department. Marcus Cole and Sarah Jenkins, the other two executives, met similar fates. Cole was extradited from Singapore. Jenkins had her retirement assets seized. Both served prison time. The Old Boys Club was officially disbanded. The board of directors, including Thorne's old roommate George Riley, were forced to resign in disgrace for their lack of oversight. The CEO was fired. Omnicorp was hit with a $58 million fine from the SEC for fraudulent accounting and insufficient internal controls. The stock, when it resumed trading, lost 40% of its value in a single day. And me? I watched it all unfold from the quiet of my home office. My identity as the whistleblower was protected by law, but within the right circles, the story got out. I was the auditor who brought down the entire corrupt leadership of a Fortune 500 company. 6 months later, Julian Croft called me. "The check from the SEC just cleared," he said. "Under the whistleblower program, my award was calculated based on the significance of the information provided. Given that my compendium was the sole basis for the entire investigation, the commission had granted me 28% of the total fines collected. 28% of $58 million. After taxes and Julian's fees, my net was $11.7 million. I didn't go back to corporate life. I didn't need to. I took Arthur Vance's lesson to heart and started my own firm, Garrett Forensic Auditing. I consult for law firms and corporations that genuinely want to clean house. I'm in high demand. The first thing I did was pay off the mortgage on my modest 2-story colonial. The second was to set up a trust to pay for my daughter Chloe's college and medical school. She wants to be a pediatrician. Now she'll graduate with 0 debt. I bought a small house on a lake in upstate New York, a place where the loudest sound is the call of a loon across the water. I still drive my 2012 Honda Accord. It runs perfectly. Some things are just built to last. Last week, I was cleaning out my garage and found an old box from my first job. Inside was a small tarnished plaque. It was a gag gift from Arthur Vance, given to me on my last day at that firm. It read, "Trust, but archive." I dusted it off and placed it on the mantelpiece in my new lake house. It looks right at home. My value didn't disappear just because a few arrogant men couldn't see it. It was there all along, encrypted and waiting. They thought they were just firing an old-school auditor. They had no idea they were pulling the pin on a grenade I had spent my entire career building. They thought they controlled the system. They never understood that the real power lies with the person who keeps the records. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button and leave a comment letting me know what you think. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories of justice served. I'll see you in the next one.